Most men don't lose women because they're broke, unattractive, or unsuccessful. They lose women because they tolerate what weak men tolerate. See, women don't test men to hurt them, they test men to identify them. And every time a man ignores disrespect, abandons his purpose, or negotiates his values, he's answering a question she never asked out loud. Here's the truth most men avoid. What you allow is what you teach. What you tolerate becomes the rule. Strong men don't dominate women. They dominate themselves. They don't beg for validation, chase attention, or live in fear of loss. They operate from principles, not pressure. And when a man knows who he is, where he's going, and what he stands for, something powerful happens. He becomes non-negotiable. Most men don't realize that the moment they start seeking approval, they start giving away power. Approval feels harmless at first. It looks like being agreeable, being flexible, being understanding. But beneath the surface, approval seeking is a silent negotiation where a man trades his values for validation, and the exchange rate is never in his favor. A man who seeks approval is always watching for reactions. He's measuring his words, adjusting his behavior, softening his standards, all in hopes of being accepted. But here's the paradox. The more you try to be accepted, the less respectable you become. Respect is never given to men who are unsure of who they are. Respect is earned by men who stand firm, even when it costs them comfort. Strong men understand something weak men overlook. Principles are not situational. If your values change based on who you're with, then they were never values to begin with. They were preferences, and preferences crumble under pressure. A man of principle doesn't need to announce his standards. His consistency does the talking. He doesn't argue about what he deserves. He lives in alignment with it. Approval-seeking men believe that harmony comes from agreement, but real harmony comes from clarity. When a man knows what he stands for, it creates safety, not tension. It tells a woman, this man is predictable in his character, even when circumstances change. That kind of predictability builds trust, and trust is far more attractive than compliance. Many men confuse love with tolerance. They think love means bending, yielding, and sacrificing their identity to keep the peace. But peace built on self-betrayal is temporary. Resentment always shows up later. Strong men don't sacrifice their identity for a relationship. They bring their identity into the relationship and invite the other person to meet them there. A man who stands on principle doesn't fear disagreement. He understands that disagreement is not rejection. It's simply difference. Weak men avoid difference because they interpret it as a threat to connection. Strong men welcome it because they know connection that requires self-erasure is not connection at all. It's dependency. Here's where it gets uncomfortable for a lot of men. When you stop seeking approval, you may lose people. Some will walk away, some will resist, some will test you harder than before. That's not failure, that's filtration. Not everyone is meant to walk with a man who has standards. When you raise your principles, you naturally narrow your circle. Strong men don't need to be liked by everyone. They are committed to being respected by themselves. And self-respect is the foundation of every healthy relationship. Without it, you're always negotiating from a position of fear. With it, you operate from confidence and calm. A man who stands on principle doesn't threaten, manipulate, or demand. He simply decides. He knows what behavior he will accept and what he will walk away from. And walking away is not punishment, it's alignment. Weak men stay where they're disrespected because they fear being alone. Strong men leave because they value their purpose more than companionship. The moment a man stops chasing approval, something shifts. His words carry more weight. His presence becomes steadier. His decisions become clearer. He no longer asks, "Is this okay with you?" when it violates his values. He asks, "Is this aligned with who I'm called to be?" That question alone separates men who drift through relationships from men who lead them. When a man stands on principle, the right woman doesn't feel controlled. She feels secure. She knows she's with someone who won't collapse under pressure, compromise under temptation, or disappear under conflict. That stability is rare, and rarity is valuable. Stop asking to be chosen. Decide who you are, stand there, and let everything else respond. Disrespect never starts loud. It starts subtle, a tone, a joke, a dismissal. A small moment where something is said or done that doesn't sit right, and a man tells himself it's not that serious. But what you dismiss today becomes what you normalize tomorrow. And whatever you normalize eventually becomes the standard. Weak men tolerate disrespect because they confuse patience with strength. They think endurance proves masculinity, but endurance without boundaries is not strength, it's submission. Strength is not how much you can take. Strength is knowing what you will not accept. Disrespect grows where boundaries are absent, and it multiplies when it goes unchecked. Here's the truth most men avoid. People treat you the way you teach them to treat you. Not the way you want, not the way you hope, the way you allow. Every time disrespect shows up and you ignore it, you're giving a silent lesson. You're saying, this is acceptable. And once that lesson is taught, it's very hard to unteach. Strong men understand that boundaries are not ultimatums. Boundaries are clarity. They are not emotional reactions. They are calm decisions. A man with boundaries doesn't argue, beg, or explain excessively. He simply communicates what is acceptable and what is not, and he backs it up with action. No drama, no speeches, just consistency. Many men fear setting boundaries because they're afraid of conflict. But avoiding conflict doesn't create peace. It creates tension that slowly poisons the relationship. Respectful confrontation clears the air. Silent tolerance clouds it. Strong men are willing to have uncomfortable conversations now to avoid unbearable outcomes later. There's also a dangerous lie men tell themselves. If I'm more understanding, she'll respect me more. That's backwards. Understanding without self-respect invites more disrespect. Kindness without boundaries is perceived as weakness, not because kindness is weak, but because it's unprotected. Strong men are kind, but their kindness has edges. It's guided by standards. Enforcing boundaries doesn't mean being harsh or aggressive. In fact, the strongest boundaries are enforced quietly. Sometimes it's a conversation, sometimes it's distance, sometimes it's a decision to leave. The power is not in the volume of your voice, it's in the certainty of your actions. When your actions match your words, respect follows naturally. Weak men stay and absorb disrespect because they fear loss. Loss of the relationship, loss of comfort, loss of familiarity. But what they don't realize is that every day they stay in disrespect. They're losing something far more valuable, their self-respect. And once self-respect is gone, no relationship can compensate for it. Strong men are willing to walk away not because they don't care, but because they care deeply about who they are becoming. They understand that love without respect is unstable, attraction without respect is temporary, and connection without respect is exhausting. Respect is the foundation that holds everything else up. When a man enforces boundaries, something interesting happens. Either the behavior corrects itself or the relationship reveals that it was never aligned in the first place. Both outcomes are wins. One leads to growth, the other leads to freedom. Weak men call that loss. Strong men call it clarity. Disrespect is not always intentional, but it is always informative. It shows you what someone believes you will tolerate. And the moment you decide to stop tolerating it, you change the dynamic. Not by force, not by control, but by standards. You don't teach people how to respect you by demanding it. You teach them by what you refuse to live with. Respect is enforced at the level of behavior, not words. And the man who understands this never has to chase respect because he lives in a way that requires it. If you want to change how you're treated, change what you allow. One of the clearest differences between weak men and strong men is not intelligence, income, or confidence. It's leadership. And leadership always reveals itself in how a man handles his emotions. Weak men let emotions take the wheel. Strong men keep emotions in the car, but they never let them drive. Emotion is powerful, but it was never designed to lead. Emotion reacts. Emotion responds to pressure, tone, and circumstance. Purpose, on the other hand, is steady. Purpose doesn't change because the mood changed. Purpose doesn't disappear when things get uncomfortable. A man without purpose is at the mercy of how he feels in the moment. A man with purpose knows where he's going, regardless of how he feels today. Weak men allow emotion to dictate their decisions. When they feel appreciated, they give more. When they feel challenged, they withdraw. When they feel insecure, they overcompensate. Their behavior rises and falls with the temperature of the relationship. That inconsistency creates instability, and instability erodes respect. Strong men understand that feelings are information, not instruction. Feelings tell you what's happening inside, but they don't get to decide what happens next. A man who leads with purpose acknowledges his emotions, then submits them to his mission. He asks, what decision aligns with my values and my direction? Not what decision will make this moment easier. Many men think leading with emotion makes them more connected. In reality, it makes them unpredictable. One day they're calm, the next day they're reactive. One day they're decisive, the next day they're passive. That emotional swing doesn't create intimacy, it creates anxiety. Strong men provide emotional safety not by being emotional, but by being consistent. This doesn't mean strong men are cold or disconnected. It means they are disciplined. They don't explode when they're frustrated. They don't sulk when they're disappointed. They don't manipulate with silence or affection. They communicate clearly, calmly, and directly. Their strength shows up in restraint, not reaction. When a man leads with emotion, he often ends up negotiating his values in the heat of the moment. He says things he doesn't mean. He agrees to things he doesn't want. He compromises standards just to restore temporary peace, but peace built on emotional decisions never lasts. The issue resurfaces because it was never resolved at the level of principle. Purpose-driven men don't rush decisions under pressure. They slow the moment down. They give themselves space to respond wisely. They understand that not every feeling deserves a reaction, and not every reaction deserves expression. That self-control is rare, and rarity creates influence. Weak men often confuse emotional intensity with passion, but passion without direction is chaos. Strong men channel emotion into action that serves their mission. They don't suppress feelings, they subordinate them. Emotion becomes fuel, not steering. A man who leads with purpose becomes an anchor. When tension rises, he remains grounded. When conflict shows up, he doesn't escalate it. When challenges appear, he doesn't panic. That steadiness creates trust. It communicates, this man can handle pressure, and the man who can handle pressure naturally becomes a leader. Leading with purpose also means knowing when not to engage. Weak men feel the need to respond to everything, every comment, every tone, every test. Strong men discern what deserves their energy. Silence at the right moment is leadership. Walking away from unnecessary conflict is leadership. Staying focused on the mission is leadership. At the core of it, emotional leadership says, how do I feel right now? Purposeful leadership asks, who am I becoming? One looks for relief, the other builds legacy. One chases comfort, the other chooses growth. When a man stops letting emotion run his life and starts letting purpose lead it, everything shifts. His relationships become healthier, his decisions become clearer, his presence becomes stronger. Emotion makes a great servant, but a terrible master. Most men are taught to chase attention. They're told that if they can get noticed, admired, or desired, they're winning. So they perform, they posture, they seek validation through compliments, responses, and reactions. But attention is one of the most expensive things a man can chase because it never belongs to him. It has to be renewed, maintained, and constantly earned all over again. Weak men live for attention because attention makes them feel temporarily valuable. A message, a smile, a reaction gives them a hit of reassurance. But reassurance is not value, it's a substitute for it. And substitutes always wear off. The problem with chasing attention is that it puts you in a reactive position. You start shaping your behavior around what gets noticed instead of what builds substance. Strong men understand that attention is not the goal, it's the byproduct. They don't wake up asking, how do I get seen? They wake up asking, how do I get better? They invest in skills, discipline, health, purpose, and vision. While others are trying to be impressive, they're trying to be effective. And effectiveness always outlives image. Attention is rented. The moment you stop performing, it disappears. Value is owned. It compounds. A man who builds value doesn't panic when attention fades, because he knows attention will return naturally to anything that is rare, useful, and grounded. Weak men chase what's loud. Strong men build what's solid. When a man chases attention, he often overextends himself. He gives more than he should, says yes when he should say no, and shows up in ways that are unsustainable. He's trying to secure interest instead of maintaining integrity. But interest built on performance collapses the moment the performance stops. Strong men are not in a hurry to be chosen. They are focused on becoming choice-worthy. That means delayed gratification. That means discipline when no one is watching. That means doing the uncelebrated work that builds real confidence. And real confidence doesn't announce itself. It shows up quietly and commands attention without asking for it. There's a reason attention-seeking behavior eventually repels respect. It signals neediness, and neediness communicates scarcity. Strong men operate from abundance, not because they have everything, but because they are building something. They are not dependent on external validation to feel grounded. Their sense of worth is internal and stable. Value-building men don't compete for attention, they differentiate. They don't try to be like everyone else. They work to become uncommon. They develop perspective, wisdom, and self-control. And those qualities don't shout, but they are always noticed. You don't have to chase what is naturally drawn to substance. Weak men often mistake charm for value. Charm can open doors, but only value keeps them open. Charm might spark interest, but value sustains connection. Strong men are not obsessed with being entertaining. They're committed to being reliable. Reliability builds trust, and trust is far more attractive than excitement that fades. When a man builds value, his relationships change. He's no longer auditioning, he's evaluating. He's no longer over-investing early, he's discerning. He understands that his time, energy, and presence are assets, not giveaways, and that shift alone changes the entire dynamic. Attention seekers chase moments. Value builders create momentum. Moments feel good, but fade quickly. Momentum compounds quietly and carries you further than applause ever could. Strong men choose the long road because they understand the long road leads to lasting results. Stop asking how to be noticed. Start asking how to be useful, disciplined, and aligned with purpose. Attention will find you when value is undeniable. Fear is a silent thief. Most men don't even realize how much it controls them because it doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers, a subtle voice that tells them, if I walk away, I'll be alone, or if I hold my ground, she'll leave. That whisper shapes decisions, compromises, and compromises shape lives. Weak men live under the weight of fear. Strong men live under the guidance of abundance. Fear makes men reactive. It convinces them to chase what they think is scarce. It tells them that the right woman, the right opportunity, the right circumstance is rare, and that if they don't grab it now, it's gone forever. And because fear whispers urgency, men make choices that violate their principles, undervalue themselves, or compromise their mission. They cling, they plead, they tolerate, all because they believe there is a limited supply of what they desire. Strong men see the world differently. They operate from a mindset of abundance. They know that life is rich with opportunities, people, and resources. They understand that scarcity is a story, not a reality. When you live in abundance, you no longer panic when things seem uncertain. You don't beg for affirmation because you know your value is not determined by anyone else. You don't negotiate your principles because you know there is always alignment waiting for the man who stands firm. Fear makes men compromise early. They settle for relationships, deals, and situations that feel safe in the moment, but erode their long-term growth. They say yes when they should say no, and stay when they should leave. Weak men live in reaction to potential loss, always calculating risk instead of calculating alignment. Strong men, on the other hand, calculate from principle. They ask, does this align with who I am becoming? And let the answer guide every move. Abundance gives men confidence. Confidence is not arrogance, it is certainty. When a man knows that he has something to offer, that he is valuable, that he can create, lead, and provide, he stops fearing loss. He stops tolerating disrespect. He stops tolerating compromise. He begins to operate from choice instead of desperation, and that choice changes everything. Fear also distorts perception. It convinces men that leaving is riskier than staying, when often staying is the true risk. Fear magnifies potential failure and minimizes potential gain. It exaggerates the cost of walking away and minimizes the cost of remaining in misalignment. Strong men see clearly. They understand that the discomfort of loss is temporary, but the cost of living beneath their potential is permanent. Weak men often confuse attachment with abundance. They hold tightly to people or situations because they believe they cannot find another. Strong men understand that attachment without alignment is toxic. They understand that true abundance is not about having everything. It's about being aligned with the right opportunities, relationships, and principles. When you operate from abundance, you attract rather than chase. You choose rather than beg. You stand firm rather than fold. Fear also makes men reactive emotionally. When they sense someone pulling away, their instincts tell them to grab harder. When they feel tension, they feel compelled to appease. When they sense disapproval, they feel compelled to negotiate. Strong men are deliberate. They respond from principle, not panic. They recognize fear as a signal to stay grounded, not a signal to surrender. Operating from abundance changes a man's energy. It makes him magnetic. Women, opportunities, and allies are naturally drawn to a man who values himself because his value is obvious and uncompromised. Scarcity, desperation, and fear repel. When a man demonstrates that he will not tolerate compromise, that he will not betray himself, that he is confident in his worth, he automatically attracts what aligns with him. The moment a man stops fearing loss and starts trusting abundance, he begins to live freely. He makes decisions from vision instead of anxiety. He no longer negotiates standards for temporary comfort. He no longer tolerates disrespect, compromise, or misalignment. He operates from a position of strength because he knows that what is meant for him cannot be stolen, delayed, or diminished. Fear will always try to pull you into compromise. Abundance will always pull you into alignment. Choose the force that shapes your life, and everything else will follow.